ค นะครับเร็วใครทำได้เร็วยกมือขึ้นใครนะครับไม่เอามาเลยต้องเร็วเฉยๆไม่ต้องบอกทำเองเอาลงไปครับมาตูกมือขึ้นหน่อยยกมือหน่อยครับต่อไปครับอะไรครับปากตานะครับคุณจะเก็บไว้ไหมนะครับเป็นที่สองเลยเป็นที่สองนะครับนะครับเก็บกับเสียงมาลายมาดูรถไฟเดินจากApa?
I want you to go for English.
But I would love to just go around and have everyone just say their name, and if you could just say why you're here, that will also give me a better idea of what types of things I should talk about from the book tonight. So I'm Mira, and I'm here because I wrote a book, and I want to share it with y'all.
Hi, I'm Liv. I am supporting Mira because we both did the same. We are on the same program from the States, and I don't know a lot about the South or anything about the South, so I just want to learn a bit more about it.
It's as you know, it's a quick about book branch at the movie public at Chiang Mai. Yeah. And actually, I know about tradition about South things. A little bit because I have many friends in that company, so I come because I just read in the 2 chapters, and it's very interesting to come to a discussion.
I just asked everyone to introduce themselves and just explain why you came.
Okay, cool. My name is Russell Freeling. I'm 22. I've lived in Thailand for 10 months now. Teaching down in the south in Pangnam. And I came because
Yeah. So I did this program called Princeton in Asia. That is how I ended up here the first time from 2001 to 2003. And a whole bunch of Princeton Asia folks are here supporting.
Yeah, sorry we're late.
No worries.
We weren't sure what the Thai time really was.
Right.
My name is Alex. I'm part of this group, and I'm PIA. I was teaching English at Nai Pha Luang, Chiang Mai.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so now I'm going back home in a couple months, but I get to travel around. Yeah.
My name is Gibran. I'm also 22 and also part of this group. I am working in Bangkok, environmental stuff, also as a PIA fellow. I've been here for 8 months.
I'm Nathan. I was also PIA about 5 years ago in Vietnam. I learned about the games and I'm also teaching my practice now.
Hi, my name is May. I'm also 22 years old from New York City, and like Russell, I just finished teaching in Pangnam. And I'm really excited to learn more about your program. I don't know much about it.
Hi, my name is Julia. I just came here rather by accident due to my friends. But I traveled a couple of times to the south, so it seems pretty interesting to learn more about that.
I'm a few Potter from Thai PBS, and here's my crew. We'll discover the event.
Friends in the front here.
Oh, I'm right here.
You guys are doing a performance here this weekend.
I'm Dale. I've been living here for about 6.5 years, and I just met Bob tonight through mutual friends and learned about this, and so I thought I'd stop by. I live in Bangkok. I don't get out enough, but I have been to Marathi Walk, so I've been to the south at least once, and hear a lot
More than most people, so.
to hear more about this.
Hi, my name is Sai, and I was asked to do Thai translation for this, but since we don't need the Thai translation anymore, so I'm a journalist by profession for Thai Online News, so I hope I could get some interesting stories from this event. And that was a village that I did a youth camp back 3 years ago, so it was very interesting to relive. Actually, the school that we felt we stayed there for like 2 weeks or something, so that was great to see again. Yeah.
I slept there too.
Great to meet you. What's that like that?
ฟอร์มภาษาไทยinternational team tradition Thai another Thai tradition.
And for those of you who don't know, Ratchathai is a really, really great and important online resource that is an independent place that you don't always, gives a perspective you don't always hear, so we're reading. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Nana. I'm 22 and I'm a preschool teacher. I come here because I invite me, and this is kind of a surprise. But I went to like a short seminar with some friends, some fellow from the south, from London. And I talked to them, and it's very interesting. So it's a good surprise.
Great. So, let's see. I'm going to talk just first about why I wrote the book, and then I'm going to share with you a little bit of the history of the South, and then we'll get into some parts of the book and have fun. Okay. So, I am actually now, I work as an environmental educator in California, and I run a youth program there. But before that, I spent a lot of years in Thailand. I worked in Thailand from 2001 to 2003 as an environmental project developer. Then I came back and I did language programs, and then I did my master's fieldwork here. And I also made a documentary film. I made a couple in the south of Thailand. But basically, this book is based on my first summer in Pattani. After that, I went back many times and continued to do work there. But that first summer was it left a really big impression on me. 2006 was a very violent year in the conflict in the south, and when I was heading down to Pattani, I was actually quite scared, and also just personally quite in a vulnerable state because I had a big tragedy a year earlier where I'd lost my best friend. So it was probably not the best time to be heading into insurgency zone, but I had already sort of, gotten the grant. I was heading down there, and I was nervous about the violence. And to be quite honest, in America we tend to have a lot of fear around Islam and not a lot of exposure. And despite I think being an open-minded person, I think subconsciously I had definitely had some influence from a lot of that media I'd experienced, and I was nervous about going into a conservative Muslim village and spending 3 months there. But when I got there, it was hard. There were a lot of things that seemed really strange to me that I didn't like, that didn't agree with, like the separation of girls and boys, certain rules that we had to follow. But I stuck with it, did a lot of interviews, and actually when I was there, my grandmother died, which was really hard. And I actually went home, and then I came back to the village. And at that time, something sort of changed because I was just really emotionally exhausted. And before that, I had been doing interviews every day, and going around and really, making the most of all my time, and just being uncomfortable all the time, and talking with people who would rather not talk to me. And after my grandmother died, I was just like, I can't do this, I'm too tired. And I just sort of hung out with my interpreter and her family. And really that was when I started to really get things. And it was a really special experience, and the people in the village just sort of took care of me and took me in at this time that was really hard. And I felt that experience really, being there, helped me understand at an emotional level a lot of these cultural differences that at first had seemed so hard for me. When I left, I felt really obligated to tell this story because it seemed that there was a lot in this conflict in the South. There was sort of a lack of understanding between cultures, and not a lot of people going down to the South and living there and spending time with people. And I felt like, the situation's a big mess. There's not really much I can do about it, but if there's anything I could do, I could maybe just share this experience that I had, and maybe people could also come to feel compassion and empathy for the people who I met, and in doing so, understand their culture and their position a little bit more in this conflict. So that was my motivation. And I first tried to write a novel, but it turned out that I'm not so good at writing fiction. So then I changed it up, and I wrote this book, which is sort of in the style of a memoir. So let me talk a little bit about the region. Okay, so when people talk about the conflict in the South, they're generally talking about the southern provinces of Songkhla, Pattani, Yala, and Narathiwat. And I'm actually going to read from my book, because my book got a lot of little snippets of history in it. So here's one section. When most visitors to the country think of the far south of Thailand, they do not differentiate much between the sparkling sand beaches and and relaxed coastal villages that run the entire length of the 500-mile-long peninsula extending south towards Malaysia. Even I, a reasonably frequent traveler to the south of Thailand, did not fully appreciate the cultural and historical differences that set apart the middle southern provinces of Krabi, Suratani, and Trang from the deep southern border provinces of Patani, Yala, and Narathiwat, where I propose to travel the coming summer. These provinces had once formed the heartland of the ancient Malay kingdom of Patani, spelled with one T, which spoke a different language, Malay rather than Thai, and practiced a different religion, Islam rather than Buddhism, than the dominant empire in the region, the Siamese. For centuries, powerful Patani kings, and notably queens, only grudgingly tolerated the overlordship of the more powerful Siamese kingdoms. At several points in its history, they rebelled, and in general, they aligned themselves more closely with the Malay kingdoms of Kelantan to the south. In the 15th century, the region saw flowering of Islamic scholarship and was considered the veranda of Mecca in Southeast Asia. At the end of the 19th century, when the Siamese kings attempted to consolidate their territories into what later became the modern Thai nation, they took the attitude of conquerors in the southern Malay kingdoms, replacing traditional rulers with officials from Bangkok and overhauling the traditional Islamic judicial system. Malay ethnic identity, like Thai ethnic identity, is tied to a religion. Since the conversion of the Malay Peninsula to Islam in the 15th century, to be Malay is also to be Muslim. In contrast, the vision of the Thai nation that would emerge in the first half of the 20th century was a Thai-speaking, Buddhist-centered nation that upheld central Thai cultural traditions. At points in the earlier 20th century, Bangkok outlawed the use of local language and traditional Malay clothes, and attempted to replace traditional religious schools with government schools teaching a secular curriculum. The government officials in charge of Patani were often sent from Bangkok as a punishment posting, so the region abounded with rogue administrators with little respect for local language and culture. While Malay-speaking Muslims who had migrated elsewhere in the south of Thailand quickly assimilated into mainstream Thai culture, the people of the Patani kingdom, in the defensive posture of those whose culture was being continually attacked, protected their traditions even more vehemently. So that gives you a little idea of the cultural differences that that sort of form the background. There's this very different history in the south of Thailand. Okay. So this is a slightly more up-close illustration, and here you can see this is the Patani province in gray, and that little star, that's Dhaka village, and that's where this was. And these are some of my friends in Dhaka village. And those boys are playing marbles. I don't know the last time anyone saw someone play marbles. That was cool. There's been tension between the Patani kingdom and the central Thai government for many years. And there were, throughout the last century, there were moments of uprising and moments of rebellion. There have been organized insurgent activities. But it really started up again in 2004. And there were, in January 2004, there was a major raid on a Thai weapons depot. Many weapons were stolen. And then April that year, there was a major shootout, basically, where there were coordinated attacks throughout the region on small police bases, and the Thai military came in and cracked down very hard on insurgents. And another major turning point was October 2004, what's known as the Takbai incident. And I'm actually gonna read from my book to give a little background on that. So, let's see. Alright. So when I was in Dato, I got to travel around a lot, and as I did, I learned a lot about the history of the region. So one day we traveled to the town of Takbai, the site of the tragic incident of October 25th, 2004, when 78 Malay Muslim protesters suffocated to death after they were forcibly packed 5 layers deep in army trucks and transported nearly 5 hours to an army station in Patani. I had read about this in the newspaper in America, one of the rare occasions that the conflict in southern Thailand made it into international headlines. About 1,500 people, all of them Malay Muslims, had come to protest in front of the local police station against the imprisonment of 6 village security volunteers. While many analysts speculate that the protest was organized by militants, the vast majority in attendance had no relation to the insurgency. The crowds had come from all over, many not quite sure what the protest was about, or that they were even going to join a protest at all. They had gathered in a confined area on the banks of a river, and their only means of exit was blocked by the army trucks and tanks that had come to maintain order. After the crowd refused to disperse, the army brought in water cannons and tear gas, and in the chaos that ensued, the soldiers opened fire, killing 7 people, including a 14-year-old boy. The men were then ordered to strip off their shirts and lie face down on the street in the burning sun, while soldiers stood over them with loaded rifles. About 1,300 men were arrested and packed into military trucks. Lamai pointed out to me the distance from the site of the protest in Takbai to the army base in Patani, where the protesters were transported. The journey was close to 2 hours, but the convoy of army trucks that had carried the men from Takbai had stopped frequently, extending the journey to nearly 5 hours. During this time, 78 innocent men died of suffocation. I later read accounts from survivors who told how the crushed men whispered words of encouragement to each other and tried their best with hands tied behind their backs to position themselves so as to relieve pressure on the others. Many had suffered blows to the head and body while being tossed like bags of rice into the trucks. The men on top could hear the gasping of the men at the bottom and their struggle as their breath finally left them. This incident stood out as the tipping point in the escalation of southern violence, the incident that obliterated any hope of an easy return to peace. Not only were the deaths brutal and unnecessary, but Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatра's response to them again demonstrated his disdain for the southern people. He first suggested that the young men's deaths were a result of their weakened state from fasting during the month of Ramadan. And only when placed under intense international pressure did he belatedly launch an investigation. However, none of the officers found responsible in this investigation were prosecuted or disciplined. Instead, Thaksin initiated a nationwide origami campaign in order to dump 100 million paper cranes on the South as a peace gesture. Hundreds of thousands of Thais outside the region enthusiastically participated, but for the families of the victims of Takbai, it was a poor compensation for the lives that had been lost, and a far too convenient public relations mask for the continued heavy-handedness of soldiers on the ground. Takbai and the government's response secured the stance of the insurgents, while recruiting hordes more into their ranks, garnering increased popular support for what had once been an isolated movement. So, that's a little bit about the history of the South. It's somewhat depressing. But the book is not all depressing, so don't be dismayed. But so definitely you could understand how it could be a little scary going into this situation. And in the summer of 2006, there was a lot of the killings had become quite gruesome. There had been beheadings, burnings, and a week before I had left, a Buddhist teacher had been kidnapped in broad daylight, and 2 Buddhist teachers had been kidnapped in broad daylight and beaten into comas. So it was a scary time when I was going into the village. But I had this idea of how to make myself a little bit camouflaged. So I used to have longer hair, but I thought maybe I could cut it and I could get around a bunch of hurdles. So a few days before I traveled south, I sat in a beauty salon at a fashionable new mall in downtown Bangkok. An absurdly slender Thai woman with cream-colored skin, platinum blonde hair, and the eyes of a manga cartoon character had cut off all my hair. I feared not only my imminent imprisonment within the gender constraints of Patani village life, but also the danger of traveling on the open roads in Patani by myself. My push for androgyny was a good hedge against both dangers. I did not want anyone in the red-hot district of Yaring to know that there was a foreigner staying alone in a village nearby. Conveniently, the Indian half of my ancestry ensured that my skin was the exact same shade of brown as most of the village residents. And with short black hair, a pair of blue jeans, and rubber flip-flops, speeding by at 40 miles an hour on a motorcycle, I could easily pass for a Malay Muslim young man. I have not been graced with an excessive amount of curvature, and a tight sports bra under a baggy t-shirt easily eliminated what little remaining evidence there was that I was a female. As I walked through the streets of Dato now, with Soraya, who was my guide, and my sublimely androgynous getup, I sensed the confusion in the furrowed brows of village residents, who stopped their daily chores and gaped across their porches and out of their windows to see this curious new being in their midst. So, after I arrived in the village, I basically just hung out with people. And I spent a lot of time, oh, this is me, looking like a boy. Pretty effective, right? Which one is me? Hi. Yeah. So once I was in the village, I did a lot of fishing. This is a fishing village. So here's some pictures. You got a good idea of the fishing life from the movie. But the thing about fishing was that nobody really caught that many fish. And I kind of wondered, and I had worked for an environmental NGO in the past, which, in Thailand there's a lot of talk about, maintaining the way of life of the Thai villages. But it looked like fishing really wasn't going to work for that much longer. And I was kind of interested in finding out what the young people were up to and what they thought of it. So that was sort of my next realm of exploration. So with the current state of the Patani Bay fishery, I wondered what prospects there were for Dato's youth. The bay could barely support the fishermen of the older generation. It seemed impossible that it would also be able to provide for their many children and the families they would one day have. I was not sure if the youth of Dato had the same interest in a life on the bay as their parents. Soraya, my guide, and her friends were portraits of piety who seemed content with the rhythms of village life. But I had also seen other young men and women who did not fit the mold quite so well. The village had its share of teenagers who sped around on motorcycles and seemed only to want to escape the watchful eyes of their parents. I wanted to talk to them, but it would not be easy. So, I staked out this group of teenagers who hung out at a tea shop behind the mosque. Because at night, in Malay Muslim villages, the social life revolves around tea shops because there's no alcohol. So, at a tea shop behind the mosque was a group of wairun. Wairun means teenager in Thai. And these were not just any wairun, but a group who had a particular penchant for keeping their hair a little long and wearing old punk rock t-shirts. I had seen groups of them sitting by the beach in the late afternoon, smoking cigarettes, or huddled around one tiny MP3 playing cell phone that they had between them to listen to Nirvana. This was probably the group of youth with whom the leaders of Daco would least like me to associate, as I learned about the way of life in their village. From the outside, they seemed to represent much of what Malay Muslim community leaders feared: the loss of traditional culture, the intrusion of Western values and materialism, and a lack of discipline and piety among the youth. And that was exactly why I wanted to talk to them. If the South was changing, where was it going? The problem was that nightlife was also restricted to men. Women didn't go sit in the tea shops. Women stayed at home and took care of kids. But the World Cup was coming, so I had this really good excuse. I had to figure out, like, how am I going to go walk into these tea shops at night, just like, hey, what's up? But it was 2006, and the World Cup was about to start. And, like, the World Cup is really important, and I really love soccer. So I figured, with this as my excuse, I could probably swing it. So I decided that I was going to go out to the tea shop, and at 9 p.m. on the day of the opening game, I explained to Soraya, my guide, that I was going to a tea shop to watch the World Cup. I did not tell her which one, and she let out a whistle of amusement at my boldness. Good luck, she said. I headed down the dark path that ran between the mosque and the graveyard towards the Wyron tea shop. The shop was built at the back of its owner's house and delimited only by a second wall and roof. It was lit with a single fluorescent bulb dangling from a dusty string of wires. Sunk into the sandy ground were 2 stone tables, around which the Wyroom, in black rock concert t-shirts, sarongs, and fashion mullets, sat on red and pink plastic chairs in various stages of dilapidation. I took a deep breath as I rounded the corner of the mosque, unsure how I would stage my entrance into this space. I need not have worried, though, for as soon as the Wyron saw me approaching, they erupted into cheers and called me to sit with them. Apparently, my celebrity status in the village would win me access even into their world. One boy quickly vacated a flimsy pink chair to make room at one of the tables, which I noticed had the name Kurt Cobain carved into the stone tabletop. While another jumped up from a platform in the corner, where several Byroon were lounging in a giggling pile of gangly teenage limbs to take my drink order. I had been to enough tea shops during the day to know how to order in Malay a cold Ovaltine with ice and no sugar, and they all laughed with pleasure to hear me speak their language, muttering to each other, "Pandak, pandak," meaning good. Squeezing more conversation out of them than this was going to be difficult, since their attentions quickly returned to the soccer game. I could do little but sit concertedly on my Ovaltine during their side conversations in Malay. But they looked after me like a special guest, continually checking to see if I wanted anything more to drink, and buying me packets of fish crackers to stave off any late-night hunger. They refused to take my money when close to midnight. I finally headed back to my bedroom. So that was my, yeah.
So if you were pretending to be a guy, why were you hesitant around?
Oh, I wasn't like pretending like I was a guy. I mean, I was like, I mean, everybody knew I was a girl.
Okay.
Yeah. But I should have clarified that. All the stuff about, you know, looking like a guy was mostly when I was traveling on the road.
Okay.
Yeah, because motorcycle travel, I'm told by all my friends, they say that the most dangerous time is when you're on your motorcycle. So that was more like.
But in the town,
everyone knew I was a girl. They just thought I was really weird. They were like, she's a girl, but she doesn't look like a girl. She's 6 feet tall. Yeah. There are many confusing things about me in this town. But I think that it was probably helpful, and that was actually part of my thinking. Was if I look less like a girl, then maybe I won't be expected to act as much as a girl. And it kind of worked. So the next, and then which relates to the next thing that happened, which, so I thought, okay, made it to the tea shop, but the next stage was I really wanted to play soccer. And I've been playing soccer so far with the little 10-year-olds, which is fun, you know, but like after a point you're like, all right, I can only play so much with 10-year-olds. So I said, okay, I'm gonna go play with the Wyroom. And I went down to the field and I had my soccer shoes with me, and they looked at me and were like, "You come here to play soccer?" And I was like, "Yeah." And then again it was like, "Woohoo! We're here to play soccer and cheers from everyone. And they were so sweet, and you know, they let me, you know, one boy, the field was crowded like it always is in Thailand, and the boys would always sit out so I could play. And it ended up becoming a really cool way for me to get to know them without having to use language, because you know, you could see, oh, who's gonna pass me the ball, or who's gonna, I ended up making really good friends like through soccer that way, which was really cool. So I think I'll probably just read one more section and then open it up to questions. But one thing that I really wanted to get across in the book was just this, you know, from the outside, this community looks really strict, and a lot of the southern communities look, you know, and even if you read a lot of what's been written about them, they sound really traditional, and you know, men and women don't ever interact, and there's no music, and there's a whole long list of things which are considered to be a sin in the village. But when you actually are there, there's a lot more wiggle room in between, and I actually think that's really important for people to know about, because I think it really helps us understand each other and understand that we're all human. So the young men played soccer on the breezy expanse of the town square, or in the palm-shaded patch of sand by the sea. Meanwhile, the young women sat in clusters along the seashore, chatting as they watched the sunset, or in pockets in the village square amidst the activity that bubbled up there. A 50-foot buffer zone was maintained at all times between them and any similar such group of the opposite gender. Yet, despite this geographic separation, to which they strictly adhered, in the evenings, the village was dotted with young people talking on their cell phones in what was undoubtedly a technologically facilitated remote courtship. I could see them stealing moments outside their houses or the coffee shops where they were sitting with their friends. They would lean against a dusty village wall or sit on a front porch outside earshot of their parents, speaking coyly, eyes twinkling to their unseen friends on the other end of the line. Even Miriam, I learned from Soraya, had a certain friend she met at school with whom she had been speaking on the phone for several years. Confounded at how these arrangements could be set up in a village where, as far as I could tell, there was little to no face-to-face verbal exchange between the sexes, I sought out Soraya to unlock this mystery. She laughed and said, "It's very simple, Mira. A couple of girls will be riding together on a motorcycle down the road to Patani. Then, before you know it, a couple of boys will whiz by very close, and then beep, 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 beep," she imitated with her hands, the act of sounding a horn on a typical Honda motorcycle. "The boys will pull in front and stop, and the girls will have to stop too. They will exchange phone numbers, and off they go. That's it," she said, throwing up her hands, clearly amused by the nature of these transactions as well as her own flippant rendering. And then after this, I started to notice when I would go down that road, oh yeah, there's all these kids pulling each other over on the side, exchanging phone numbers. And another funny moment came when I went to I visited a Pano, which is, and I write quite a bit about sort of these religious schools where people send their kids to study, and they're a really controversial issue, and the Thai government tends to view them with a lot of suspicion because a few of them have been found to harbor insurgents. But so anyway, at one of these religious schools, there was a teacher who was showing me around, an ustaza, and she said, "Okay, now this is where the girls sleep, and this is where the boys sleep, and there's a wall in between. The girls have their classes here, the boys have their classes here, and here's the wall." And I said, "Oh, did they ever have a chance to interact with each other?" She said, "Well, they're not supposed to, but I see them do it all the time." She says, "A girl will stand over here, and a guy will be over there on the other side of the wall, and they'll look at each other, and they'll catch each other's eye, and then the girl will go like this, and she'll spell out her whole phone number. And the guy will be sitting there, and pictures. Here are the white room behind the mosque. And there's a really great picture. Stylish. And this is a funnel. Those are the huts where the kids live. And this one is really funny. So the same teacher who was telling me about the whole cell phone trick, she said the older boys, when they're about 18 or 19, they start to be in the market for a wife. So she said, you'll notice that they take really good care of their huts. And they do all sorts of home improvements, make really nice front porches, and they grow these beautiful plants around them. So she pointed this one out. She said, this boy right here, he's an eligible bachelor looking for a wife. I said, yeah, it looks pretty nice. It looks pretty nice. I'll go with it. So, cool. So, that's all I'm going to read for now. I mean, if you'd like me to read more, I can. But I want to make sure there's time for people to ask questions. So, I'd like to open it up to you all.
With that scene with, you know about this, there are two villages had like a sort of, like it grew off.
Yeah, yeah.
And they came in the boats with good, like, no lights. And,
yeah.
I was wondering, like, because, you know, they said that girl, like, in the music videos.
Yeah.
And, like, they're both from the same region, so I was wondering if in that village it was more modernized or something.
Yeah, so what he's referring to is, so there's this, I wrote a whole chapter about this, this music is called Dike Hulu, and it's traditional Malay folk music. And I was really surprised because I was talking to my, one of my, like, punk rock Wairun friends, and he was explaining, he was like, you know, in this village, there's many different groups of Wairun. She's like, you have the underground rock Wairun, which is us. and he's like, and then you have the Pua Chiwit Wairun. The Pua Chiwit is kind of like classic rock, like at Carabao. He's like, so then you have the Pua Chiwit Wairun. Like, and then you have the Dike Hulu Wairun. And I was like, I couldn't believe that there were Dike Hulu Wairun because, like, in my experience, like, folk music is kind of like generally played by old people, and the fact that there were like teenagers who were like genuinely into this folk music was like kind of cool, and they really were genuinely into it. So and I went and I sort of like followed them around, and they had this little clubhouse where they would practice. It was really fun, and then they had this. There was this night where they had this competition, like. Well, it was more like a festival. It wasn't like a winner or loser, but there's a spirit of competition, and they invited this, and that's, you saw that in the video actually. So they invited the other village, and they arrived in boats at night, and then they take turns singing, and so sometimes they improvise the lyrics, and sometimes there's like a little boasting and joking involved. And on this particular night, the other village had brought along with them 2 women singers, which was like. Woo! And one of the women was like so scandalously dressed. And when I say so scandalously dressed, she was not scandalously dressed at all. But to me, you know, in the context, she was unveiled and she had a shirt on that was like sheer black, like a see-through black shirt. And she was wearing just like a camisole top underneath. And there was another woman who was dressed conservatively in a hijab, but when she sang, she like very seriously gyrated her butt, like Shakira style, for a long time. Like every people were like screaming, and I was like, "What's happening? Oh my god!" And it was like this really funny moment of just like of thinking that the rules are so strict, and then realizing that like people really have a sense of humor about all of this. But the thing about Dike Hulu is it's actually it is a bit controversial. So and there's different levels of it. Like there's a really modern Dike Hulu, and you make these videos, which is what you're referring to, I think, where there'll be a girl sitting on a bench in Patani. I mean, they're really very tame, but like she's not wearing a hijab and she's wearing tight pants, and it's a bit scandalous. And so, and a lot of the conservative elements in Patani are sort of censoring this and saying it's bad and it's un-Islamic. But it's also, but then the other side is like, well, it's Malay, and Malay culture is really important. So they kind of accommodate each other in this little way. And I think that the difference between Dato village and the other Tangyong Lulo village is like more on the mainland, and they're closer to Patani. I think they're a little more urban, and Dato is like a little more country bumpkin, you know. So I think that might have some.
That's a good question.
So that title relates to this concept of aesthetic equality, which is yeah. Yeah. So for those of you in the room who are wondering why everyone's so aesthetic equality is this concept that is quite controversial right now. And I like to think that I was ahead of the controversy. It's really hard to explain. I'm going to try. There's in Thailand. God. There's this thing called aesthetic equality, which is normally translated to the sufficiency economy or just enough economy. And it is a philosophy that is most generally associated with the King of Thailand. However, you could say that it predated the King of Thailand. In the 70s, there was a lot of activism coming from universities, and that was a period of sort of strong leftist movement among Thai students. And that was when you first had scholars and academics talking about this idea of a community-centered development, which was sort of in opposition to this very like export-led industrialization, rapid development. And these scholars talked about like the values of the Thai community and sort of trying to create more like development methods that moved a little slower and were more appropriate to these agricultural communities. In 1996, I think around then, at some point this became really central part of the King's realm, of what he promoted. The reason it's so controversial now is because it kind of gets at the heart of like yellow shirt, red shirt business. Because the aesthetic equality is sort of like this, we need to go slow, we shouldn't develop too fast, and a lot of what Thaksin's policies were much more about, what did they do?
Having to pay should be enough for
yeah. There is like
sort of
there is a sense the way it's been conveyed. There's definitely like a sense of that you get into trouble when you're sweet, and then you should be happy with it. And there's so and I talk about this a lot in the book. And I go into this village. I personally am very skeptical of this and the way it's been applied. And I went into this village a bit skeptical of it. And the title, Just Enough, is, in some ways, it's meant to make people think. Because, you know, when I felt that, it's clear that a lot of, for me, the concept is like, it doesn't seem quite fair to, the just enough concept is generally, is often espoused by middle-class people, and it can sometimes be a bit prescriptive. And so I went into the village kind of very skeptical of it, and then there's, and a lot of what, but then ironically, I think that I asked at one point at the end of the story, I'm talking to one of the kids and I asked them, do you want to, like, have you guys thought about doing stuff outside the village? And the question is more cultural to me because one thing that really struck me in this village is that their lives are so centered around Islam and their culture is, they're in some ways so insulated from mainstream high society, but they're so culturally isolated that they, that in some ways it prevents them from being able to comfortably leave the village. And I was asking them about this, like, do you ever want to leave the village? Do you want to do other things? And the one kid said to me, you know, we're happy just to be here. You could call us the just enough. You could call us the Biden Politicians. And then I thought that was pretty interesting, and I think that when people talk about just like being happy with what you have, it's interesting to see in a community what are the conditions that make people happy with what they have. And sometimes those conditions might not be things you're so comfortable with. You know, and it might mean that you are culturally quite different than the rest of your society. It might mean that you value religion over getting a job in a mainstream industry, like that. That's a big question. Sorry for all of you who are like, why was that such a big deal? But it's
a big deal. That's what red shirts.
It's a big deal. Yeah.
Going back, I guess you've been back recently. Can you talk a little bit about some like changes that happened?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I would love to.
Sure.
I would really like to talk about that. Yeah, I was just there like a week ago. And it's funny because the Wairun they've all grown up. They have wives and kids now. One of them just had a kid 3 days ago and he looked so sheltered. He was like, hi Mira, this is my baby. Okay, take deep breaths. Yeah, so there's that. I think one thing, the village, I'm actually a little bit worried about it, in the sense that when I was there was still a very strong community cohesiveness, and Dato is kind of this really feel-good village. It has been for many years. A lot of people go there. A lot of people have visited Dato. It's not when I went to Dato, it's not like I went to deepest, darkest Navrakulat and stayed in some really scary place, you know. This is a village that has had strong leaders, has had a strong, a really straight imam, who's a very exemplary imam, has a very strong children's religious school, Harika, which is really central to the community. Unfortunately, in recent years, Dato has a really lousy head. And he, village headman, Kuyaban. And he had recently been elected when I got there, and there was some concern about him. But at this point, a lot, and it's just in the last couple of years really, but now a lot of my friends, and a lot of the Wairun tell me that the younger generation of kids are doing drugs now. Whereas this group who I write about in the book, I can say with certainty that they definitely never drank alcohol. Some of them definitely smoked ganja, but that was the extent of it. But the new generation, in the village now, there's yaba, there's heroin, there's ice, and the village headman's a relative of his is the person who sells it, and he looks the other way. So that's really bad. So that's a big change, in terms of the things that I care about and look at. Another interesting thing which struck me when I watched the video and made me really sad, the scene of the mosque, I think it's quite beautiful. And the village school, the geography, there's a village religious school, and there's this sandy expanse, and there's the ancient cemetery, and there's an ancient mosque, and it was this really beautiful town center. And the way like budgets work these days in Thailand, there's a lot of decentralization. So the budget goes, you have a big budget, and it goes to a project in the village. So the Thailand school, the children's religious school, got a budget, and what they did with it was they built a big wall around the school, which was a bummer because the school was so beautiful, it was such a central place, and now there's a wall around it. And then they got a budget for the mosque, and then what they did was they built a wall around the mosque. And then, when I was just there, there's now been a wall built around the cemetery. So it used to be that when you walked in this area, you could see the school and the mosque and the fields and the cemetery, and it was a really lovely, open place. And you know, whatever connection there is between, you know, sightlines and architecture and senses of community, all that stuff was there. And now when you walk here, it feels like you're in Bangkok a little bit. So some of that has been lost.
Why did you decide to write
yeah, so really, I did not go there planning to write a book at all. I went there because, I was doing my master's thesis topic, which I ended up ditching and writing a book instead, was about environmental social movements in Thailand. And I could have studied that anywhere. But I was interested, I just really wanted to understand what was going on in the South and the Southern conflict. It upset me, and I just wanted to understand it. So I chose to do my research there, not really knowing what a challenging or rewarding experience or moving experience I would have. I was like, I want to go there, that would be interesting, I'll learn a lot. And then it ended up being like a real deep thing.
But I mean, it's kind of like there's a lot of places to work with, there's a lot of that stuff going on.
Yeah, well, because I had worked in Thailand prior to that, and so I had been really invested, and I like followed Thai politics a lot, and I had worked in environmental work in Thailand, and I was really interested by the grassroots social movements that were happening in different parts of the country, and that kept me interested also in sort of the interplay between the national government and grassroots movements, and so I was interested in all of that stuff. And I just really loved the South of Thailand, and at that time I was like too ignorant to really differentiate between like Krabi and Patani, so I thought it was all the same thing. And I was like, there's this terrible conflict, I want to learn more about it. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the conflict and the impact of the conflict on the people in the village? Is it something that impacts their daily life? Is it something that seems very distant from them?
Yeah.
What are their
this particular village, it does not impact them the way it impacts other villages. Like, partially it has, I think, has to do also with their isolation. You know, they're like on this little sandspit, and they're very close to really red hot areas, but they're kind of like their own little world. So they don't have, you know, in some of other regions, you have a lot of pressure, like a village headman will have incredible pressure on him from both the insurgents and the authorities to be giving information and not giving information, and you know, and cooperating and non-cooperating, and that type of pressure, I don't believe exists to that extent. However, it's still like the imam of Dato, who is a really old, really straight man. He said he stopped being involved in the religious school because he was afraid of being accused by the authorities of being an insurgent. And which is they like to do is burn schools. And when you burn a school, you like the kids don't go to school for a month or so.
And you don't garner support for your cause, which is a
well, yeah, and this is the relationship towards public schools there is really complicated because public schools are the things that are turning from a Malay into a Thai, and they teach you not to speak Malay anymore, to speak Thai. So people have very mixed feelings towards public schools.
Do the kids go to public school?
When they're in elementary school.
That was in the video, right? That was
yeah, so that was the Thai government school. So at primary school level, kids go to public school.
And what's the Buddhist population of the village?
Zero.
Zero.
This is a total.
And so the teachers in the public school are.
Most of the teachers in the public school are Muslims, but there are a few Christians.
They teach Thai.
Yeah, and all the teachers, Muslim and Buddhist, teach in Thai. Yeah.
Yeah, I was curious, on that topic, like, did you ever know the relationship between the Thai, Central Thais, who really like live the deep south, with like the Malay Muslims? Like, maybe you saw that more in like tiny towns.
Yeah. I mean, in the tiny town, there's just like people have been coexisting for ages happily, like neighbors, and they're. I mean, this is the sad thing about this conflict, is that people who have been coexisting happily for 50 years are now there's Buddhist militias that have their own set of weapons.
Did you ever encounter that or ever do any interviews?
I didn't do extensive interviews. I did get to travel to some of those regions, and I did get to talk to people about but not in any deeply investigative way. Yeah, he just, I don't know, I went to meet him, I talked to him, he stared in the distance, then he got up and walked across the street and bought me 2 yogurt drinks, and then gave them to me.
Was it really symbolic thing to that?
I don't know, I think that's just how he rolls.
And the second thing, this is the personal one, was, for me, I think one of the most beautiful passages in the book was about, and the reflections on what makes the sense of home.
Yeah.
As you were saying, you really feel that connection when you got back after your grandmother's death to the village.
Yeah.
I mean, you could go more into that. I was very curious about your reflection on the difference between sort of the West and the East, of what is home and what constitutes that feeling. Because you were saying also, I think you were kind of, I personally felt, Marie, was like you were saying, connected a lot to your cousins with grieving.
Yeah.
With your, for your grandmother, and then coming back, reestablishing all that relationship with everybody in the village.
Yeah, no, well, thank you, and thank you for, I'm glad that those passages were meaningful to you, because they were meaningful to me, and at some points in the editing process, I don't know, there was some talk about we should leave those out, and I was like, no, they're really important to me. And I think, thank you. And I actually don't think I would have written, I think that part of why I wrote the book was because, and part of why the experience of being in the village affected me at a very emotional level was because I was I myself was in such an emotionally raw place. And so it was almost like things were in hypercolor, technicolor. Everything was I was kind of fragile, and I think that because of that, this feeling of longing and missing something and of being displaced from something you love, and wanting something you love, so losing that was something that feeling I was very sensitive to, and I think that's what struck me about Nick, the climbing kid, was that this feeling of having lost your home and this longing of something that you can't have back, and so I think that emotion very much informed the writing of the book. And in terms of concept of home, that's hard. I don't really know. And honestly, it was kind of just I think it was just coming back to Dato and being so raw and just having a little baby, who was my little host brother who had ignored me before, just reaching and wanting to hug me, and when you're that emotionally raw, you're just a kid hugging me, and it just means so much, and just these little acts of affection just meant so much more to me, and I think in a village, in a small village, in a small town, from the outside, it's kind of boring. It's like you don't really, it's just like, oh, it's daily life. And that daily life doesn't mean anything until you become part of it, and those people, you become invested in them and you care about them, and I think somehow that happens.
Yeah, it was so great when, like, you know, when you moved back to the Tadika and then he came over from the house.
Yeah,
to sleep with you. It's like,
oh, I'm glad you left.
Point, I read an article a while ago about dating age people in Saudi Arabia who
About what people?
dating age people in Saudi Arabia.
Oh yeah.
Who did exactly the same.
Yeah, Bluetooth.
Yeah, and it's all in Mercedes and SUVs because it's Saudi Arabia, but the description of how they exchange their cell phone numbers is exactly the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing.
Totally, yeah.
I checked.
Yeah.
Ideas or research that you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Either related to this or just in general.
Well, you know what? It's really funny. It's because being here and revisiting this has like taken me back. Because for the last 7 months, I can tell you this and you're all gonna laugh, but for the last 7 months I've been in Brazil doing a solo girl surf safari and making hip-hop music videos about it. I'm a rapper and a music video maker. And that's yeah, I know, right? You're like, whoa, yeah, I know, I feel like I'm like jumping between different times. It's a little weird. And so that's what I've been doing. So I'm editing some of those music videos now. And yes, doing stuff like that. But yeah, and then I left Brazil and this book came out and I came here and I was like, whoa, now I'm in the other part of my life where I used to do research in a village in southern Thailand, and I wrote this book, and I loved writing, and writing has been a part of part of my 7 months in Brazil was also like there's a lot of writing, there was blog writing, and rap writing.
Are you writing a rap in Portuguese?
No, all my raps I write in English, but sometimes I collaborate with people and they write lyrics in Portuguese. So yeah, I don't know what the next project is after this, but I know I'll have one. And I have like a whole book of short story ideas just about Thailand and about my experiences. And just when I went back to the South this time, I was like, oh God, and there were so many like moving things, and it's amazing to see the teenagers as growing and where their lives are going, and the beautiful dramas of their own.
And at the same time, you're still based in California.
Yeah. So I'm sort of figuring out how to combine them. But I have been in California being an environmental educator. Then I did this stuff in Brazil, which related to the California environmental educator stuff. And I'm going back to California to continue being an environmental educator 3 days a week while making raps, music videos, and books. The other days of the week.
Power to
Yeah. Great. San Francisco. Yeah.
Actually, this is a bit weird. Like, one of the chapters you mentioned was about how disgusting it was and how there was so much goat shit everywhere. You're starting to enjoy this beautiful sunset, and then your foot is in a pile of human feces. It's a great comical moments of that chapter. But I was like, do you have any pictures of what it looks like? Because it was. I was so curious about how disgusting it was.
This is a cool picture because this kid, this is what you draw when you grow up next to the ocean. That's an 8-year-old who drew that, or maybe even younger. And this is the kid who never, ever, ever went to school. He's been in 4th grade for 5 years. But look at all his awesome creations that he makes out of styrofoam. He's so cool. That doesn't, it doesn't, I don't have any good pictures of it. I mostly took picture of that. There you can get a little idea of like the strewn garbage, but it's much worse in certain areas, you know, like where the where the sort of the wave pattern ends up delivering a big pile somewhere. But yeah, so you could be sitting like on something like that and have a lot of like dirty diapers under your feet.
And also citing the other one where you were with the old-time environmental NGO worker who was planting those trees, like the tree you talked about.
That's the edge of the mangrove forest. That's the fish release, the shrimp release, yeah.
Oh, that was the shrimp release.
The shrimp release, yeah, the little kids, yeah. And then, let's see, this is the cracker making.
What camera do you use?
There's the mangrove forest.
Oh.
Yeah.
Is this SLR? This is much.
No, I used, oh god, I'm such a bad filmmaker, I don't even know the name of the camera I used. It was a camera I borrowed from school. It was a nice camera. It's not HD though, it's pre-HD. But these pictures were just taken with like my point and shoot Canon. Yeah. Yeah, but the video. Oh, you didn't see the video, but anyway. Don't worry about it.
Under the.
Also, the mangrove. So the mangrove forests are really ecologically important, and they act because they have all these root structures. So they're kind of like nurseries for the fish. So the fish, there's a lot of places to hide, and they're also very nutritionally rich. So there's a lot of like microbial life there. So it's good eating. Ask me after, but I want to be sensitive to everyone's time. So thanks everyone for coming. Purchase a book. I've done them all in public, so it's just the easiest one to rattle off. I am the Lorax, and I speak for the trees, and now I'm smacking carbon taxes on the guy who makes me scabbing me from trees, sitting with my hair in the breeze, while I've been raising up an army in the truffle of trees, cause it seems that we are headed for a new world order, where millions of Bangladeshis will be living underwater, where summers are getting hotter and winters are getting shorter, starting more wars for oil, sending kids across borders. It's our sons and daughters, we're dodging missiles and mortars, in a slaughter to feed our overconsumption disorder. Yeah, political ecology is the study of power, who drills and who kills and who gets paid by the hour. When the spoils of war go to oil lords, it gets sour like how certain contracts hiding behind the Twin Towers, heart-wrenching. But how come no one's paying attention? Every time it gets mentioned, we just sigh or we flinching, then keep pumping more gas into our SUV engines. You olive skin, you Muslim, they'll put your ass in detention. It's time we get off the bench and start screaming dissension.